Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started with this next topic. And before we get started with this topic, I'm going to share something with you guys that I typically share with all new students that are first getting started on the path to enlightenment. And that is that you shouldn't believe any of the teachings of the Buddha. It's very important to set aside any belief, because with belief, you don't know what's true or false, and you're not going to be able to awaken to wisdom. That's what needs to happen in order for you to get to enlightenment, is you need to have wisdom. You need to know what's true or false. And with belief, you don't know what's true or false. So what you're doing with the teachings of the Buddha is that you're learning, you're investigating and examining his teachings. You're then reflecting on those teachings to independently verify them. And then you're practicing, you're integrating them into your life and starting to train your mind. This is what helps you to get to wisdom. So anything that you learn from any teacher ever, or a book or anything like this, a video, you should never believe what somebody's sharing with you, but instead learn, reflect, and practice. You need to independently verify it. That's how you get to wisdom. So when I'm teaching you, whether it's this topic or any other topics, never believe anything that's being shared. On this particular topic, you're not going to have much of a way at this point in time to independently verify it, because you're not experiencing enlightenment and you wouldn't necessarily be able to independently verify it. But when you're learning the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 Precepts, all these other teachings, you can independently verify that what's being shared is 100% the truth. And then as you're getting closer and closer to enlightenment, you'll be able to independently verify what it is that I'm sharing here. So what you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're awakening to the natural laws of existence. These natural laws that the Buddha taught, the unenlightened mind is unawakened to them. It doesn't have the wisdom of them. That's why it struggles and has difficulties in the world. Because when you're trying to navigate a world that you don't understand, you're living in a world that you don't understand, you will struggle and you will have difficulties. So the teachings of the Buddha, they're not explaining the way the world should be, and that if everybody follows these rules and commandments, that then the world will become a peaceful place. Instead, he's explaining the way the world is. And by understanding the way the world is, and you can independently verify what he's teaching you, now you have wisdom about the world around you, and now you can navigate the world more readily, and you won't struggle and have difficulties, because these natural laws are affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. And you've done this same exact thing with other natural laws. When we first grew up, we didn't have the wisdom of the natural law of gravity. And this is why we struggled. We had difficulties. We fell down, we hit our head, we busted our elbow open. We had all kinds of difficulties with the natural law of gravity. We broke our toys, we broke other people's stuff, we knocked over our glasses and spilt our milk and all kinds of stuff when we were growing up as a child. And this natural law of gravity was affecting us whether we're aware of it or not. There's no being who's overseeing the natural law of gravity. Nobody turns it on, nobody turns it off. Whether you're aware of it or not, it's affecting you. But when we gained wisdom of that natural law, by the time we were 10, 12, 14 years old, we were fully awake to that natural law, and we were able to navigate the world more readily. We didn't have struggles and difficulties. We started tying our shoes a little bit tighter because we started making wiser decisions. We started looking at the surface of the sidewalk when we were walking. We stopped being so giddy all the time when we were walking. We started making wise decisions because we had more wisdom. And now we're at the point where we can climb ladders, we can ride bicycles and motorbikes, and we can get on airplanes and fly around because we're fully awake to this natural law of gravity. We don't struggle and have difficulties anymore because we have wisdom. Well, when you're struggling and having difficulties in the world, and that sadness and anger and all those other discontent feelings is part of that struggle, that's the mind having a lack of wisdom, that it just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. So in order to awaken the mind to enlightenment, you need to be able to get to wisdom, and belief doesn't do that for you. So whenever you hear a teacher teaching, or whenever you're reading a book or any kind of learning whatsoever, you should never believe it. You would like to independently verify it so you can get to wisdom. And that's what's going to ultimately help you awaken to these natural laws so that you'll no longer struggle in the world, and you can make wise decisions about how you navigate the world with your relationships and all the other decisions that you're making. So this topic of enlightenment and what is enlightenment, I'm going to be sharing with you what I understand enlightenment to be based on experiences that I've had, but just understand that it's not something that you're going to necessarily easily understand when you're first learning it, right? While I will help you to understand enlightenment, it's a challenge for the unenlightened mind to understand it. It's kind of like, could you describe chocolate ice cream without having ever tasted chocolate ice cream? You wouldn't be able to fully appreciate and understand what chocolate ice cream is unless you've actually tasted it, right? So someone can explain to you all day long what chocolate ice cream is, but but you won't really know 100% of what it is until you're tasting chocolate ice cream. So the same thing is true as I can sit here and explain to you what enlightenment is all day long, but you're not going to fully understand it until you're experiencing it. And on your way to enlightenment, you're going to get various glimpses of what enlightenment is like, and you'll start understanding more and more what it is as you're getting closer to it. But it does help at the very beginning of your journey to enlightenment to understand what enlightenment is. So I'm going to share it with you and help you understand it. And you're surely going to know more about enlightenment after our conversation than before. So like right now, whatever you know about enlightenment is less than what you're going to know in about 45 minutes to an hour from now. But just understand you're not going to know 100% of what enlightenment is at the end of our conversation. So there's more for you to be able to learn. It's quite a challenge for an individual to learn and understand it until they're actually experiencing it. But enlightenment is the ultimate goal of the teachings of the Buddha. This is the goal, that if you're interested in getting to enlightenment, this is the ultimate goal of his teachings. So what enlightenment is it's a mental state that you can attain in this life, or you can attain it at death. But the ultimate goal would be to attain it during this life, because once your mind is enlightened, you'll be experiencing peace, calm, serenity, and contentedness with joy permanently. Your mind will no longer experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, resentment, shyness, jealousy, displeasure. All of that, it will be eliminated. So if you attain enlightenment during your life, you can enjoy it for the rest of your life. Whereas if it's attained at death, okay, that's the next best option, but you didn't get to experience it during your lifetime. So that means you were still frustrated and agitated and annoyed at different times during your life. So it would be best if you were able to apply dedication, determination, and diligence to learning and growing and developing to be able to get to this enlightened mental state during your life. So if you attain enlightenment at 20 years old or 30 or 40 or 50, hey, you can enjoy the rest of your life in that enlightened mental state. So it's a mental state where the mind is unshakable, right? It's steady, it's calm, it's unshakable. You will have eliminated all discontentedness. And then as a result of that, you're also not going to experience rebirth, where you're not going to be coming back into the world to experience it over and over and over and over again. Because while there are certain aspects of the world that is quite wonderful, and by the time you get to enlightenment, wow, life is really, really wonderful. And there are certain aspects of life, even in the unenlightened state, that's quite wonderful. But think about all the misery and despair that you've experienced at different times, the sadness, right? The heartache, the difficulties, the grief, the sorrow, the difficulties learning how to walk and read and talk and eat and urinate and defecate and take care of this body, right? As you're putting on lotion, right? Taking care of this body, right? We have to constantly take care of this body and comb our hair and brush our teeth and clean out our ears and put on deodorant and all these different things. We're just taking care of this body over and over and over again, right? So while life can be quite enjoyable, and by the time you get to enlightenment, it's going to be wonderfully enjoyable, why keep experiencing it over and over and over again? So by getting to enlightenment, you can experience this peace and joy for the rest of your life, and then you'll know that you're not coming back to have to go through all that heartache and misery again. The way that you accomplish this is by freeing the mind of craving, anger, and ignorance. This is referred to as the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 fires. These are the 3 high-level descriptions of the pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind. The more detailed description is called the 10 fetters. We call it a fetter because a fetter is a shackle and a chain and a ball that keeps a prisoner trapped in a certain area. During ancient times, prisoners were kept confined in a certain area because of having this fetter on their leg. So the Buddha discovered these 10 fetters or these 10 pollutions that are keeping the mind trapped in the unenlightened state. And when you learn them and you understand the teachings and the tools and techniques of how to eliminate them, this is where the mind experiences the peace and the joy of the enlightened mind. But when we talk about them from a high level, we describe them as craving, anger, and ignorance, because this kind of summarizes all of them together. And this is what I'm going to be teaching you on Wednesday morning, what craving, anger, and ignorance is. So freeing the mind of craving, anger, and ignorance, realizing non-self, and dissolving and eliminating the ego is what will produce enlightenment. And that's just a summarized way of saying eliminating the 10 fetters. Those are the 10 pollutions. And I'm going to introduce you to the 10 fetters here in a moment. So that's what is accomplishing this mental state, is that you've purified the mind. You've cleared out this pollution. So the mental state of enlightenment is the mental state. That's what you're attaining as the ultimate goal of the teachings. But the path to enlightenment is a purification of the mind, where the mind has been purified through training of the mind. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you, is how to train the mind and get rid of these causes and conditions, these pollutions that are keeping the mind in the unenlightened state. Sometimes people describe enlightenment as like ultimate bliss or happiness. I tend to not refer to it this way because people get confused that when they're in the jhanas, which are preliminary phases that the mind experiences on its way to the first stage of enlightenment, there is ultimate bliss. Like you can notice that there's a lot of excitement and the mind is uplifted and you can be really almost bouncing off the walls as you're moving into the jhanas. These preliminary phases that you experience before you get to the first stage of enlightenment, it's like night and day. From being off the path to enlightenment to be experiencing the jhanas, it's like night and day for you. It's very noticeable. And these are qualities that you're experiencing at all times during your day. Sometimes people confuse the jhanas and they think it's only something you're experiencing during meditation. But in reality, these are qualities that you're experiencing at all times during your day. And there can be this ultimate bliss. And sometimes people that are in the jhanas, because it's night and day from what you're experiencing, they think that they're enlightened and they will be describing what they're experiencing as enlightenment. So you can have some people that will tell you enlightenment is ultimate bliss. Or some people will tell you enlightened beings still experience anger and sadness and frustration. This is because they themselves think that they're enlightened and they are still experiencing anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings. But I can assure you that enlightened beings do not experience any anger, sadness, or frustration or any of those other discontent feelings. While there is plenty of happiness in the enlightened mind, it's unconditioned happiness. What you think of as happiness right now is typically based on some condition. You get a new boyfriend or girlfriend, you're happy, right? It's sunny outside, you're happy. Your bank account balance is a certain amount, you're happy. You're happy because of something. This is the conditional feeling. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you have unconditional happiness, where you're just happy all the time. You wake up, you're already happy before you even looked outside and see whether it's sunny or not. There's no condition that needs to be met in order for the mind to be happy. So in the unenlightened state, if this happens and 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 this happens, then I will be happy. And that amount of happiness is less and less and less, because as your expectations grow and the things that you want from the world, you can be happy fewer and fewer amount of time. But when you get to unconditional happiness, you're just happy all the time. There's no condition that is causing that happiness. So therefore, it doesn't arise, it doesn't change, and it doesn't fade away. This conditional happiness that is experienced in the jhanas, as well as at other times in your life, it arises, changes, and fades away. So therefore, it's ultimately unsatisfactory and dissatisfying because it's only temporary. You're only happy because of something. You're happy because you got a new job. You're happy because you got a new car. You're happy because you bought a new house. You're happy because of something. And that thing is impermanent. It's not permanent. So that means your happiness is not permanent too. So if we describe enlightenment as happiness, what most unenlightened beings understand as happiness is this temporary happiness that arises, changes, and fades away. So in the mind of an unenlightened being, how is enlightenment any different than what they're already experiencing? They wouldn't understand it. So that's why I tend to not use the word happiness related to enlightenment, even though an enlightened being experiences plenty of happiness. I think of it more as a mental state by the time you get to enlightenment, that you have this mental state of joy that is just always there. It's always on. It's like the light is always on, right? By the time you get to enlightenment. In the unenlightened state, you can only be happy if certain conditions are met, right? And that's the fewer and fewer amount of time that you can be happy as your expectations grow. But when you clear all of that out of the mind and you purify the mind, this is where the mind can then experience the natural qualities of enlightenment, right? So the way you can think about this is there's like the sun, and then there's the clouds that are blocking the sun. And when the clouds move away, the rays of the sun come shining through. So you can think about it as your mind is naturally enlightened, but there's these pollutions that are hindering you from being able to experience it. And when you get those pollutions out of your mind, now the brightness and the radiance of the enlightened mind can shine through. So while we refer to it as attaining enlightenment, something you have to attain or something you'd be interested to attain, in reality, you can think about the mind as already being enlightened, and it's just being hindered from experiencing those qualities because of the pollution that's in there. And when you get rid of that pollution, then the mind can experience the peace and the joy that's always there. It's just always on, right? And this actually matches more to what you experience on your way to enlightenment, because at different times in your day, you can kind of experience a little bit of the qualities of enlightenment. You can experience a few minutes or a few hours, even a few days, some people even a few weeks and months. But then you're going to get discontent again because you're not fully purified yet. The mind's not fully purified. So you'll see the rays of the sun shining through the clouds every once in a while. And as the clouds move away, then you can see the brightness and the fullness of the sun. But eventually the clouds are going to come back again. But the enlightened mind doesn't work that way. Once you clear the pollution out of the mind, there's no more pollution. It will never come back. That it's been fully eradicated out of the mind. In the mind, in the enlightened mental state, it's permanently in that mental state. You won't regress backwards. It's physically impossible for an enlightened being to ever experience anger ever again. It's physically impossible for an enlightened being to ever experience sadness or frustration. If you associate sadness with love, you'll learn and you'll be able to see yourself that love doesn't cause sadness. Love is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, where you have active goodwill towards others, and you can have love for beings without sadness. But it's craving, desire, attachment that is causing the sadness. So when you clear away all this pollution and you completely eradicate it from the mind, there's no longer any causes or conditions that will produce anger or sadness or frustration or any of these other discontent feelings. So that's why it's physically impossible for an enlightened being to experience any of these discontent feelings. Okay, so this is a bit about enlightenment. Some of the advantages of enlightenment, I've already been discussing them a little bit, is the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy permanently. It's impossible for an enlightened being to experience anything else in terms of these discontent feelings. You'll notice that there's this high degree of focus, concentration, memory, and clarity of mind because you've eradicated the pollutions in the mind. And the mind is now performing optimally. Right? It's just like a musical instrument, that if a musical instrument isn't tuned well, it's not going to play beautiful music the way the instrument's intended to play. But if you tune this instrument perfectly to the middle, now it plays beautiful music the way it was intended to play. So the mind is the same way, that when you tune it with the teachings of the Buddha, it'll perform optimally. And now you can use these qualities in your personal and professional life. And as I've been mentioning, all these discontent feelings are eliminated from the mind. All these discontent feelings and others. It's physically impossible for an enlightened being to experience those. You'll notice that you have deep wisdom about the path to enlightenment, and you can be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to everybody around you. Right now, you might find that to be challenging. There's probably certain people that you like and certain people that you dislike. And in certain situations, you're grumpy and you're irritable and you're agitated, right? But by the time you get to enlightenment, you won't have that anymore because you've eradicated the pollution of mind that's causing that to occur. You'll be able to practice politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect with everybody and anybody around you. And again, it's challenging for you to do that right now because the mind has these pollutions. So you're not experiencing that right now, but by the time you make your way to enlightenment, you will be able to do that. You'll notice that you're not causing any harm in the world. So no harm is coming back to you. As long as you're causing harm to other beings, this harm is going to come back to you. So by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind's fully awake to the wisdom of the natural law of karma, of cause and effect or action and result. So you're not making any unwise decisions that's going to produce harm to others. So therefore harm isn't coming back to you. So you're not causing any harm in the world through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. Then your personal and professional relationships are going to be at ease. They're going to be blossoming. Because right now you might be bitter and harsh and hostile and aggressive and irritated and annoyed, disgruntled and disrespectful in some of your relationships. So that's what's going to come back to you. Right? But by the time you get to enlightenment, you're not doing those things anymore. And you've been doing that for an extended period of time, for multiple years at that point. So all your relationships will be at ease. But you're not going to get to that through changing other people. You need to change your own mind. That's what the path to enlightenment is. It's this inner growth. It's this inner development. It's this almost self-help program. It's a well-vetted self-help program that's been around for 2,500 years, right? So it's well tested and tried. So you're doing this inner work on your own mind. You're not going out into the world and trying to change other people. You're working to transform your own mind. And you need to understand your own mind. So that's what the Buddha is teaching you in his teachings. There's these core central teachings that you need in order to attain enlightenment. And you're going to be learning pretty much all of these in this course. You're going to need to learn the three universal truths, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. Siddharth's going to teach this to you tomorrow. Then the 5 precepts I'll be teaching you on Wednesday. Then the Brahma Viharas, I don't actually teach it in this class, but I kind of reference them, or at least Siddharth will reference them if he uses the same examples that I use, that this is referenced, but you'll learn this in the first book, and you'll learn this in other programs that I teach. The 10 fetters, I'm about to introduce you to them now, but you'll get more and more familiar with these 10 fetters as you go in your journey, because every part of the teachings of the Buddha, in one way or another, are teaching you how to eliminate these 10 fetters or these 10 pollutions in the mind. The 7 factors of enlightenment, I'll introduce those to you today as well, help you understand what those are. And then you're going to start learning meditation training. So these are the core central teachings that you would need to learn in order to get to enlightenment. There's other teachings that you surely need to learn in order to get to enlightenment that connect in and they plug into these, but this is the core central focus when you're first getting started. And notice that I don't have the cycle of rebirth up here, as I mentioned, because you can set that aside. These are the core central teachings that are going to really focus on eliminating the pollution from the mind. So you would like to learn, reflect, and practice these teachings, not believing in them, but independently verifying that they're true. And you should be able to do that. And where you can't do that, ask questions, right? So Siddharth is going to teach you this tomorrow, right? He's going to help you to understand what are the teachings of the core central teachings of the universal truth of impermanence, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, all of these core central teachings, at least the first 3, and where you can't independently verify what is being shared, ask how to do that, because any person who's sharing the teachings should be able to help you understand how they independently verified it, and then you should be able to see that truth for yourself. Okay, so this is the core central teachings that you need to get to enlightenment. Oops. Any questions on anything I've been sharing so far? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a small question. You talked about the enlightened mind has so much joy, all the time joy and happiness. Mm-hmm. For example, if I'm happy or joyful, I think I'm smiling and laughing. Wouldn't be the same for an enlightened person that he all the time smiling, laughing, or?
So we tend to associate happiness with like bouncing off the walls and, laughing all the time and all these kinds of things. But that's the conditional happiness. That's the excitement, right? The mental state of joy, it's just always there. But that doesn't mean you're just constantly laughing and bouncing off the walls. That would be excitement, right? So this mental state of joy, yes, it's very easy to smile for an enlightened being, that your smile is very accessible. In the unenlightened state, you're kind of disgruntled and agitated. But for an enlightened being, their mind's going to be bright and uplifted. So it's very easy for them to smile. But that doesn't mean that they're constantly laughing, right? Because that would be conditional experiences. But an enlightened being will laugh, they will joke, they will have fun, but what I'm talking about here, about this permanent mental state of joy, it's just constantly joyful and easily accessible to be cheerful and bright and radiant in the enlightened mind because of the mental state of joy. Mm-hmm. You have a question?
The first question is, I wonder, have you attained enlightenment?
Okay, so a person who's enlightened, they're not going to say that they are enlightened. If somebody tells you that they are enlightened, right away you know that they're not. because an enlightened being wouldn't go around and tell people that they're enlightened. But also an enlightened being is not going to say they aren't enlightened either, because that would be lying, and they wouldn't lie. So an enlightened being knows that they're enlightened, but they don't need other people to know that they're enlightened. They wouldn't have a desire, a longing, yearning, because there's no benefit in telling other people that you have attained enlightenment. So if you're interested in knowing if somebody has attained enlightenment or not, there's other questions you can ask them besides this one. So here's some questions that you might ask somebody. You can ask, like, when's the last time you experienced anger or sadness or frustration? You can ask questions like, is it possible to eliminate anger and sadness and frustration? You can ask them, is it possible to eliminate the ego? And things like this. The only reason why you would be interested to know if somebody's enlightened or not, and that might be why you're asking, is that if you're going to study teachings from a teacher, if they're enlightened or very close to it, then they'll be able to guide you to enlightenment. If somebody's not enlightened or they're not close to it, they wouldn't know how to be able to guide you to enlightenment. It's kind of like, would you be interested in learning how to drive a car from someone who's never driven a car before? Or are you interested in learning how to drive a car with someone who's driven it many times, and maybe they've been an instructor for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, right? So if you'd like to ask those kinds of questions, you can ask me those kinds of questions and I'll answer them for you. So feel free to ask those if you like.
When's the last time you experienced anger?
Sure. So this is a question that was asked of me in a retreat about 2 years ago. Students asked me, when's the last time you experienced anger? And my response to them was, I don't remember because it was so long ago. And they said, well, what would your son say? And my son walked in because he happened to be at this retreat with me, and he had happened to just walk into the room at that moment. And I said, I don't know. There he is. You can ask him. Right? So in front of everybody, they asked my son, like, when's the last time you saw your dad angry? Right? Because if you're going to get angry, it's going to be with people who are close to you. That's typically where you're going to get the most anger. So they asked him, and basically what he came to was 2017. That's what he said, that the last time he saw me angry was in the year 2017. So that was 7 years ago. Okay.
I have another question. I wonder, do we have craving, desire, attachment since newborn?
Yes, you already have craving, desire, attachment from birth. This is the whole reason why you're being born. So you can see this and independently verify it yourself, because when we're in the womb of our mother, everything's perfect. We're having a good old time in there. We have all this space to ourselves. We don't have to go look for food. We don't have to take care of anything. We're just hanging out inside mom's stomach, right? Inside the womb. But then when it's time to come into the world and we experience this very first impermanence and we're pushed out into the world, or surgery brings us into the world, we're discontent right away, right? Because we don't like that impermanence. We have craving for permanence. We're inside the womb. We're enjoying that. We're thinking, wow, this is great. This is permanent. Wow, life couldn't be better. And then all of a sudden, we're discontent right away because of our craving. So craving is the fuel or the cause that's producing rebirth. If it wasn't for craving being in the mind of the being prior to this being wouldn't actually be here. So we're born with craving, and that's what's coming from our previous life, is that because of craving, we're being born, and because of that, it puts all these other things in motion that are experienced. But you can extinguish your cravings and get to that peace and joy. Yeah, you're welcome. Great questions. Okay, so now what I'm going to introduce, we have a question here on Zoom. Let's see what they have. I have to take this mic off because my eyes are not so good. I can't hear them. The sound doesn't seem to work. Felix, you can't hear. Okay, let me see if we got everything set up here. Video, audio. You should be able to hear. It's showing me that all the sound's coming through. You might check your speakers, Felix. The meter is showing me that it's coming through. Oh, now it's working. Oh, okay. Good. All right. Okay. All right. So now introducing you guys to the 10 fetters. These are the 10 detailed problems that the Buddha discovered in the mind. This is what you're working to eradicate with all of his teachings. And what I'm going to do here is just kind of introduce you to some of these. And the reason why I'm introducing you to them is because at the core of everything that the Buddha taught is to eradicate these pollutions, but you don't really kind of focus on them until later in your development. When you're first getting started, you're learning things like the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, meditation training, and things like this. But just understand that all those core central teachings that I mentioned, they're working to help you eliminate these. And then as your mind is experiencing what we refer to as the jhanas, which are the qualities of mind that the mind is now experiencing, these improved qualities, that's where you start focusing on these 10 fetters more closely. But up until that time, you're just getting your arms around the Eightfold Path and meditation training and the 5 precepts and all these other things. But just understand that all of those teachings in one way or another are helping you to eliminate these. So this is like the engine underneath of it all that you're trying to dismantle. You're trying to dismantle this engine so that it doesn't keep producing all this smoke and all this difficulties in your life, right? So here, I'll introduce you to some of these so that you can understand them, but then just understand you're going to learn them in a lot more detail later. You're going to need to know what they are, the symptoms of them, how to eliminate them, and then how to know when you've actually eliminated them. And I teach various courses and retreats to help you do that. But here's just a little bit of information on a few of these. The first one is called personal existence view. What this is where the mind has confusion or misunderstanding or a lack of wisdom. It has a misperception where it thinks that this body is you or this mind is you. So the mind clings to a self-identity and a self-image and it thinks that this body is you and this mind is you. So now if you're clinging to this body and you're thinking that this is you, when somebody says something agreeable to you about this body, like, oh, you're so beautiful, or oh, you're so handsome, or oh, that color of shirt brings out the color of your eyes, or oh, that jewelry looks so nice on you, you'll get pleasant feelings. I feel good. They're talking about me because this is the body. But now the problem with that is that when somebody says something degrading or disparaging about this body, you're going to get frustrated. You're going to get annoyed. You're going to get agitated, right? So you're going to experience painful feelings if you think that this body is you. Your mind's clinging to this self-image. This is why, like, if you've ever been at a party and you spilled something on your clothing and you got embarrassed, this is because you're clinging to the body. You're wanting to be perceived in the world a certain way. And now that embarrassment is the discontentedness that's arising because the mind's clinging to this body. Right? Or if you've ever looked in the mirror and you saw a pimple or a mole, or you saw a gray hair, or you saw a wrinkle, or you got a little bit of fat here and there, and your mind was shaken up by that, that's because you're clinging to this body thinking that this is who you are. And then there's the self-identity that is part of personal existence view. This is what the mind is clinging to, thinking that this is who you are. Your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, maybe your job or occupation, or any number of different things that your mind could be clinging to, thinking that this is who you are. Like, I am American, or I am Canadian, or I am German, or I am Indian. I don't know where all you guys are from. I am Ecuadorian, right? Or I am Chinese, right? This I am. And once again, if you hear something agreeable, you'll get pleasant feelings. All Chinese people are loving and kind and friendly and warm, right? Or all Americans are da-da-da-da. If you identify with that's who you are as a person, you'll get happy, you'll get excited, you'll get elated. But then it's only a matter of time before you might be at a restaurant and 2 tables over, somebody's degrading and disparaging people from the country that you come from. And now you're angry, you're frustrated because you identify with that's who I am. Or for example, if you've ever been in a relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend and you identify with I am a boyfriend or I am a girlfriend, when you guys were together, you felt great. But then when you guys separated and now I am single, your mind doesn't identify that way. It doesn't identify with I am single. So now you might have wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship, because your mind thought the way to solve this problem, this discontentedness that you were experiencing, was to assume that role again of I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend. But it doesn't realize what the real problem is, that you're holding on to the self-identity, thinking that this is permanent, right? Or say you had a certain job or occupation, maybe like I am a police officer. Right? If I am a police officer and you're doing that job for 10 or 15, 20 years and you feel really great and you identify with that's who you are as a person, well, now if you get injured or you retire or you get fired, you'll be angry, you'll be frustrated because you don't identify with I am an accountant, right? If you're sitting in an office now doing accounting work and now I am a police officer is no longer intact. The mind's like, hey, I am a police officer and look at me doing all this accounting work. And the mind doesn't identify with that way. You'll be frustrated and irritated and annoyed because in your mind, I am a police officer, right? So this can be happening around a whole host of things that your mind can identify with. This is who you are. Your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation. I've even had students tell me one time, they said, you know, I am a great tipper. And when I go to restaurants and they ask me for a tip, I don't tip them. And I'm very conflicted over this. And I don't understand why I'm so conflicted over this. And I said, oh, you identify with I am a great tipper. And when you're not tipping, you don't feel good about that, right? This is the mind being discontent because the personal existence view, this identity of I am a great tipper, is not intact anymore. The mind's conflicted over this, right? So this is one of the fetters in the mind. This is called personal existence view. And ultimately, you're going to learn tomorrow that this body isn't you. It's not who you are. This mind is not you. It's not who you are. But the mind's confusion, the mind's pollution, the mind's misunderstanding, the mind's misperception is that this is you and this is who you are. But in order to get liberated from these discontent feelings, you're going to need to not cling to this body and not cling to this mind, thinking that this is who you are. And there's certain tools and techniques and training that you can do in order to train your mind to let go and no longer associate with this body or mind as who you are, but still make wise decisions to take care of this body and this mind. Okay, so this is the first one. The second one is called doubt. What doubt is when you have doubt about the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, or your own ability to get to enlightenment. If you have doubt, which you probably do have doubt right now, most people do when they first come to the path to enlightenment, this will hinder you from being able to get to enlightenment. It'll keep you trapped in the unenlightened state. But the way you eliminate doubt is not through belief or faith. You don't eliminate doubt through blind belief. As I mentioned to you guys, you don't believe anything in the teachings of the Buddha. The way you eliminate doubt is by investigating the teachings, examining them, learning them, and then you reflect on them to independently verify whether they're true or false. And then you practice them. And when you're practicing them and you see the quality of your mind improving, you'll know at some point, without a shadow of a doubt, these teachings are leading to enlightenment. You won't be enlightened yet at that point, but you will have seen enough improvement to your practice and to the condition of your mind that you will know that they're leading to enlightenment without a shadow of a doubt, right? So the way that you get the elimination of doubt is investigating and examining the teachings. So if you have doubt right now, wonderful. Harness that doubt, right? Become inquisitive. Roll up your sleeves and say, you know what? I do doubt the teachings of the Buddha. Let me investigate them and see if they actually are true or false. Let me practice them and see how they work. Because I know when I came to the path to enlightenment, I had an enormous amount of doubt, and I harnessed it as an inquisitive mind, and you can do the same thing too. Then there's wrong behavior and observances. What this is there's two parts of it. Wrong behavior is there's certain moral conduct that you're doing right now that is producing harm, and you may not even realize that you're doing it. Your intentions, your speech, your actions, potentially your livelihood as well, the way you sustain your life, depending. You're going to hear about this tomorrow. Depending on the things that you're doing, you're most likely causing harm. And this is why you're experiencing hostility or bitterness and arguments people are arguing with you because you're arguing with them. So they're going to argue with you, do, right? So there's certain things that you're doing that are producing certain results that you're experiencing. So in order to get to enlightenment, you need to improve your decision making around how you interact with other beings. If you continue to argue and be bitter and harsh and hostile with people, you're not going to get to enlightenment. Your mind's not peaceful and joyful when you're arguing and you're bitter and hostile and harsh with people. And as long as you're being bitter, harsh, and hostile with others, this is all going to just keep coming back to you. So the Buddha provides you guidance around moral conduct so you can see how to train your mind to get to the point where you can be peaceful and joyful all the time. You can't just eliminate this fetter by snapping your fingers and, okay, now I learned the teachings and I'm just going to snap my fingers and start being loving and kind to everybody. It's going to take training. That's why the meditation is there and all the other training. It's going to be gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. One of the biggest myths about the life story of the Buddha is that he sat under a tree, he meditated, and instantly got to enlightenment. This is not true. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. He says it very clearly in his teachings if you look at his own words. And you know this to be true, that you can independently verify because everything you've ever done in life has been that way. Whether it's learning English or learning some career or occupation, it's been gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. So why would enlightenment be any different? You can't just learn something and instantly snap your fingers and be an expert at it. So as you gradually learn, practice, and progress on the path to enlightenment, you'll see the qualities improving. And one of those things you need to gradually develop is your moral conduct. So you're going to start learning the wisdom of this tomorrow of how to do that. But then it's going to be challenging for you to implement that with your parents, with your siblings, with your life partner. If you have children, people like this that you're really close to, it's going to be challenging to not be argumentative, to not be bitter and harsh and hostile. But the more that you implement the training, you can wear away those pollutions, and then you'll be able to be more loving and kind. So you can eliminate this wrong behavior by eliminating your unwise moral conduct. And the Buddha is going to give you the guidance on this moral conduct in the Eightfold Path. And then when you see that, you don't believe it. You learn it, reflect on it, and practice it. And you can see that, yeah, when you do those things, you experience unwholesome results. So eliminating those from your practice, you'll experience improved results. So as long as you're going out into the world and being bitter, harsh, and hostile, that's just going to keep coming back to you. So it doesn't matter how much meditation you do. If you're not improving your moral conduct, you'll never get to enlightenment. It's not possible to meditate 23 hours a day, but let's just say you meditated 23 hours a day and you went out into the world for 1 hour a day and you were bitter, harsh, and hostile. You're not enlightened, right? So it doesn't matter about the amount of meditation. You're going to need to meditate in order to get to enlightenment, but you need to improve your moral conduct and the way you interact with other people too. That's what wrong behavior is. And you'll be able to purify your mind and eradicate that. Then what wrong observances is, this is like rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship. If you thought that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship is leading to enlightenment, then the mind is deluded. It's confused. It's having misunderstanding. There's a lot of places that refer to themselves as Buddhist or Buddhist temples that are doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. You might have been involved in some of that stuff. But that's not the teachings of the Buddha. Even if it's an ordained practitioner who's doing these things, even if it's at a temple, there are no rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship in the teachings of the Buddha. Because the ultimate goal is to get to wisdom. You need to get to wisdom in order to transform your mind. And there is no rite, ritual, ceremony, or worship that's going to produce wisdom in your mind. So the Buddha never taught any rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. So whether you go and attend these kinds of things or not, that's up to you. That's your decision. But your mind needs to know, if you're going to get to enlightenment, that these things don't produce wisdom. So let's just say you're at home and your family would like to go to church or the synagogue or the mosque or something like this, and you go with them as a family event, and they're up there with getting wafers and drinking juice and, all different kind of holy water being sprinkled around. Okay, you're just hanging out with the family. You guys are going to go to dinner. You're going to go to the park. You're going to go watch a movie or something like that. It doesn't mean that your mind has wrong observances, but your mind needs to understand that there are no rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship that produces wisdom and that produces enlightenment. If it did think this way, then the mind still has this fetter. So sometimes before somebody even comes and learns with me, they've already eliminated that portion of this fetter, that they understand that, yeah, rites, rituals, ceremonies doesn't produce these things. And that's the whole reason why they might be coming to learn with me, because they know that I don't do those things, because those things don't lead to enlightenment. So if you grew up with rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship in your life, you can see that it didn't lead to peace and joy, that you didn't eliminate your anger and your sadness and your frustration through practicing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. So that's why the Buddha didn't teach it. So if you're ever in an environment where those things are happening, even if they're attributing it to the Buddha didn't actually teach those things. So this is the first three, and you would need to eliminate these first three in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. And then there's number 4 and 5, which is sensual desire and ill will. I'm not going to introduce you to those because you're going to learn plenty about those as you go through the course and you go through your other training. But these first three are ones that you would like to kind of focus on and know about. These others as well you're going to learn about, but let me just focus on this one, and then I'll focus on number 10 as well. Number 8 is conceit. What conceit is it's part of the ego. Personal existence view and conceit is what we refer to as the ego. The word ego didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha, so he didn't use that word, but he rightfully separated it into these two things because their symptoms are different between the two. But the combination of these two things is what we refer to as the ego. What conceit is where you're interested in putting yourself above people or putting yourself below people. So you might look down on people and you might look at them in degrading and disparaging ways. This would be conceit. This is where you're judging and measuring and comparing that you're above people. Or you might put yourself below people, which is just as dangerous as putting yourself above people. If you put yourself below people thinking that you are lower than the people around you, this is going to be impactful to your mind. You're going to be uncalm and unsettled. If you've ever had a boss that you were like really scared to be around because you looked at yourself as being below them, you found it trouble and difficulties in having good quality work or having good conversations with this person. Or if you've been around a celebrity or a politician and you are all shaken up by being around them, this is because your mind's putting yourself either above or below this person. So you're going to need to eradicate the conceit where you're not judging others, you're not looking down on them, you're not looking up to them, that you just see everybody as being equal. And this takes time for the mind to be trained to be able to do this. And there's certain training that you'll learn about in other programs and other courses that will help you do this. But I just make you aware of this here in this particular course because it takes such a long time to eliminate conceit. It'll take you many years to eliminate it. So anytime you see your mind judging other people and you're measuring and comparing, putting yourself above or below them, you would like to cut that off and don't allow the mind to do that because it's just going to damage your relationships. You would like to see everybody as being equal. We all have different roles in society, but that doesn't mean one is more important than the other. Right? There's a president of a country or a prime minister of a country, and then there's somebody that's sweeping the streets too. These people aren't higher or lower than others, even though other people might think of it that way. These are just different roles, right? We would like somebody that runs our country in a good way, that good government, but we also like clean streets too. These things are very important, right? But if we look at people as being above or below each other, we're going to talk down to certain people and we're going to talk up to other people. And this is going to make it challenging for you to have harmonious relationships with everybody. And if you're in mixed company, you're having to switch and talk to one group of people one way and another group of people another way, and your mind's constantly having to switch back and forth between this, and you'll find it challenging. So you would like to get to a permanent practice where you just treat everybody polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, not seeing yourself above people and not seeing yourself below people. And then there's this last fetter, which is called ignorance. You're going to learn a lot about this on Wednesday. Ignorance is the unknowing of true reality. This word ignorance is what we're translating, at least other people are translating from the words of the Buddha. A Buddha or an enlightened being doesn't talk down to people, doesn't look at people in degrading and disparaging ways. And this word nowadays, ignorance, is kind of like a degrading and disparaging way to refer to somebody. I would never talk about somebody as being ignorant. But if you understand what this fetter is, it really means the unknowing of true reality, or misunderstanding, or confusion, or misperception, that the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. That's a better way to think about this. That in the unenlightened state, it lacks wisdom. That's essentially what we're getting to, is that it lacks wisdom. One of the big things that the mind doesn't understand in the unenlightened state is that your mind is causing your own discontent feelings. And you're going to be able to awaken to that wisdom through the Four Noble Truths. So that's why you're not believing any of the teachings, because this fetter is the fetter of all fetters. This is like the worst one, because as long as this one is in place, all the others are going to still be there to a certain degree, right? So you would like to eradicate ignorance through arising wisdom. And that's why I teach you, don't believe anything that I say, because belief won't eradicate ignorance. Because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because somebody convinced you to believe it, or you convinced yourself to believe it. But when you get to wisdom, you know the truth, right? So if you grew up with Santa Claus in your culture, when we grew up, we believed in Santa Claus. We had this belief in Santa Claus, right? And for so many years, we might have believed in Santa Claus. But at some point, we learned the truth, that there is no Santa Claus. And I don't know about you, but my mind was shaken up when I found that out, right? I was like, whoa, what do you mean there's no Santa Claus, right? So I was 8 years old when I found this out, right? And I was shaken up by that because my belief was shaken, right? Because I didn't know what was true or false, and now I was confronted with the true information. Well, now it doesn't matter how many big, overweight men in red suits with white beards that I see, I know that there's no such thing as Santa Claus. My mind is unshakable. There's no way that anybody can convince me that Santa Claus exists. Doesn't matter how many Christmas carols I hear, no matter how many pictures of Santa Claus I see, no matter how many presents I see, I know they're not delivered by Santa Claus in one night. My mind's unshakable, and probably yours too, right? Because you know the truth. Well, all these other teachings that the Buddha shared, you can get to that same unshakable truth. This is why your mind can be unshakable. By the time you get to enlightenment, there's nothing that can shake it up because you know the truth. You've independently verified it for yourself, and you've purified the mind. So it's wisdom that's going to lead to that stability where when I had belief in Santa Claus, the mind is shaken up. So when you have belief, your mind can be shaken up. But when you have wisdom, nobody can shake you off of that. You know the truth with 100% certainty. So that's how you eradicate this ignorance, is by arising wisdom, by independently verifying the teachings and practicing them. You'll be able to see the truth for yourself. So any questions on any of this? The 10 fetters? Okay. So now, understanding the 10 fetters, now I'm going to introduce you to the 4 stages of enlightenment. Because as you're eradicating the 10 fetters, you start to move through the 4 stages of enlightenment. And remember, these fetters are something you're going to dive into later in your journey to enlightenment. I'm just introducing them to you here. But there's these 4 stages that your mind moves through as you're learning and practicing the teachings. We refer to it as stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. These are the 4 stages of enlightenment. Some people just refer to it as the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stage of enlightenment, right? And then there's something called a Buddha, which we're going to talk about. That's not an actual stage of enlightenment. It's a unique individual, and we'll explain to you what that is. A Buddha is an arahant, but they've done it in a unique way. So a stream enterer, this is the 1st stage of enlightenment. They've eliminated the first 3 fetters. And there was a whole bunch of preliminary work that they needed to do in order to get to that. It's not a 1-month thing. It's not a 3-month thing. It's going to take you some time to get to this 1st stage of enlightenment. And having done so, this is pivotal in your development, because by the time you get to the 1st stage of enlightenment, your mind will not regress backwards from that point forward. You will have significantly reduced your discontentedness. It'll be a mere fraction of what you once experienced when you were off the path to enlightenment. So by the time you get to that 1st stage of enlightenment, you have significantly reduced your discontentedness, but you're still experiencing some discontentedness. So in that 1st stage of enlightenment, we refer to it as a stream enterer. And the reason why is because just like a log enters the stream and it's going to eventually get to the ocean, once you become a stream enterer, you're going to get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. Either in this life or some future life, a maximum of 7 births, you're going to get to enlightenment. So maybe you've been a stream enterer in a previous life, and maybe this is your life to now get to enlightenment. So as a stream enterer, you will get to the ocean. You will get to enlightenment. So that's why it's so pivotal, because you've significantly reduced your discontentedness and you will get to enlightenment. So there's the potential that you've been a stream enterer in the previous life. But even if you haven't been a stream enterer in a previous life, you can actually get to that stage of enlightenment in this life and keep on going. There's no need to stop at each one of these particular stages of enlightenment. But in order to get to that first stage, there's a whole lot of preliminary core teachings that you would need to learn. And then part of that is you're eliminating the first 3 fetters. Then having eliminated those first 3 fetters, when you start thinning out number 4 and 5, central desire, your mind now moves into the second stage of enlightenment, referred to as once returner. The reason why is because if you die in that stage of enlightenment, you will come back one more time before you get to enlightenment. So maybe you were a once returner in your last life, and now this is your life to get to enlightenment, right? So this is a second stage of enlightenment where they've already eliminated the first 3, and now they've thinned out number 4 and 5. And then the third stage of enlightenment, we refer to it as a non-returner. This is a person who's eliminated the 5 lower fetters: personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior and observances, central desire, and ill will. All 5 have been eliminated. In this type of person, they only experience discontentedness like once every 3 months, once every 6 months. It is very minimal and very minor and insignificant when it occurs. And because of that, you can get complacent in this third stage of enlightenment because it's very insignificant and very infrequent, but your mind's not enlightened yet. So you need to stay dedicated and diligent to your practice to be able to get all the way to enlightenment. So in this third stage of enlightenment, we refer to it as a non-returner, because if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you'll be reborn into the heavenly world, but then from there, you will get to enlightenment. This realm of heaven is not permanent. Beings in the heavenly realm, they still need to get to enlightenment. If you get to the heavenly realm as a non-returner, you will get to enlightenment in that next birth. But if you don't get to enlightenment, if you're born into the heavenly realm and you're not a non-returner, there's the potential that you could be reborn into other realms. So there's not just one door to get into the heavenly realm. You can get into the heavenly realm as a non-returner, but you can also get into the heavenly realm in other ways too. But you would still need to get to enlightenment from that heavenly realm. So this is what a third stage of enlightenment is going to experience, is a significant reduction, very minimal discontentedness. There tends to be some complacency that could come in, and you need to stay diligent in that stage of enlightenment, because you oftentimes can become complacent and your mind is not yet enlightened. And then from there, the third stage of enlightenment, once you completely eliminate all the 10 fetters, now, not only have you eliminated 1 through 5, but you've eliminated 6 through 10, your mind is now enlightened. We refer to this as an arahant. What an arahant is somebody who's fully purified their mind. This is a word that was used during the lifetime of the Buddha, and it's still in use today, but nowadays more and more people might just refer to it as an enlightened being. So a person who's eliminated all the 10 fetters, their mind is completely purified, the mind is now enlightened, and we refer to it as an arahant. You're not experiencing any discontentedness whatsoever. And you'll know that this has happened because 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, you're not experiencing any discontentedness whatsoever. Your mind's fully purified. And you'll know that to be true because you know the situations where you once got angry and frustrated. And you know you argue and frustrated and irritated with people, and you're not experiencing that anymore for a year or 2 or 3 or 4, however long it's been. And you'll know that your mind is enlightened at that point. So this is what an arahant is, and this is the fourth stage of enlightenment, an enlightened being. And they're not going to be reborn anywhere. If someone dies in the fourth stage of enlightenment, there is no rebirth. What comes next for an enlightened being after this life? The Buddha doesn't talk about that. He left it as an undeclared teaching. Sometimes people say once you get to enlightenment and die, you don't exist anymore. He didn't actually say that. He left this as an undeclared teaching. He of course shared that you're not reborn in the cycle of rebirth, but no existence anywhere. He didn't say that. So sometimes people say that once you get to enlightenment, you don't exist anywhere anymore. But you can see in the original teachings of the Buddha that he doesn't say that. He says that he's going to leave it as an undeclared teaching because students asked him questions. And he says, this is an undeclared teaching of what comes next, essentially. Okay, so these are the 4 stages of enlightenment. Then you've got something that's referred to as a Buddha, Gotama Buddha, or the Buddha. This is what we refer to as a fully, perfectly enlightened one. What a Buddha is what I was describing earlier, that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people in the world, right? And countless people get to enlightenment during their lifetime. Their teachings are going to be very clear, very concise, very precise, because they've gotten to enlightenment by themselves, so their wisdom is very deep about how to get to enlightenment. And then the third criteria is that once they die, they would have already preserved their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So these are the three criteria. Get to enlightenment by themselves, dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their teachings, and countless people get to enlightenment. And then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people get to enlightenment after their death. So those are the three main criteria of what make a Buddha a Buddha. So as I said, you can get to enlightenment, but you won't be a Buddha at that point because you're going to need teachers and guides. And the reason why is because a person who's going to become a Buddha has one particular quality in their mind that other people don't have. Your mind functions the same way as a Buddha, but there's a certain quality that your mind doesn't have that a Buddha has. In your mind, you have a certain limited capacity, that your mind is like a hard drive on a computer, that maybe you have 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte, and you can store files up to that capacity. And then when you reach that capacity, you have to delete old files in order to store new files. And this is why, like the last 5 or 10 years, you can remember pretty much all the things that you've been involved in. But when you think back to your childhood, you just have spotty memories. You don't have direct recall of the things that you were experiencing in your childhood. You just have spotty memories because you've deleted those files and now you've stored new files. But a person who's going to become a Buddha, they have an unlimited capacity to remember things from their current life and their past life as well. And now what they do is they accumulate all that wisdom that in their last life, they put that together to be able to now be able to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. So they have a profound and deep memory. They have an unlimited capacity in their mind. They don't have a limited hard drive, so they can remember all these details. And that's how they can accumulate this wisdom over multiple lives to be able to then get to enlightenment by themselves. Then they also have this other ability to quickly determine the condition of somebody's mind without that person even telling them anything about their mind. Like a Buddha can sit with somebody and they can actually observe the quality of that person's mind. And then they only do that as a way to provide them teachings and guidance to be able to help them. And they would only do that in a solicited way. They were not just going to go around the world and say, hey, you've got this problem and you've got that problem and you need to change this and you need to change that. That would be arrogance, right? But if a student is with a Buddha, that Buddha would be able to observe the quality of that student's mind and then share teachings with them that's going to help them to eradicate those pollutions, to help them get closer and closer to enlightenment. This is actually the real power that a Buddha has, is that nobody knows that they're an actual Buddha. Because a Buddha is going to know that they're a Buddha, but other people aren't going to necessarily know that they're a Buddha. It's not like their ears turned a certain way or their nose is turned a certain way, and now everybody knows that this person's a Buddha, or a certain mark on their forehead. If that was the case, then if everybody knew who the Buddha was, then they would be on their best behavior when they're around this person, and they wouldn't be able to use that ability to observe their student's mind and then offer them teachings that would be able to help them. So a Buddha, they've transcended any interest in fame or fortune. They're not interested in that. They're not interested in going out into the world and professing that they're a Buddha and now come bow down to the Buddha, right? That's not what a Buddha is interested in. A Buddha is interested in seeing as many people as possible get to enlightenment, because that's what's going to preserve the teachings. The more and more people that get to enlightenment, it's going to preserve the teachings in the hearts and the minds of the individual, right? So now the teachings can continue in the world. So a Buddha is not interested in other people knowing that they're a Buddha, because now they can observe the natural state of their students' minds and then be able to be more effective in helping them get to enlightenment. Whereas if everybody knew who a Buddha was, this ability would be rendered useless, because now people would just probably be on their best behavior around that person, right? And then lastly, a Buddha is going to be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. A Buddha understands that students learn just as much through their spoken words as they do through their actions, right? So students are going to learn through the actions of a Buddha. That yes, they learn through their spoken words, but if a Buddha is an enlightened being and they're walking around the world, you can see how a Buddha functions. How do they think? How do they talk? How do they interact? What kind of word choices? What kind of word tones do they use? How do they interact with people, right? You can observe that through their actions. And a Buddha understands that they're teaching just as much through their actions, if not more, than through their actual spoken words. So a Buddha isn't going to teach one thing and then do something different. They're going to actually do the same things that they're teaching. So if they're teaching you how to have right speech, they're going to have right speech, right? Or they're teaching you right action. They're going to be practicing this right action. So you'll see that they'll be practicing the exact same things that they're actually teaching. Okay, so this is what a Buddha is. Any questions on the 4 stages of enlightenment or what is a Buddha? Yeah, sure.
Just not sure if I understood or was listening. What's about a person who got to enlightenment? He's not able to see all his countless lives in the past, or only a few, or what was it?
Not everyone who gets to enlightenment will see their past lives, but some people will, right? So while a Buddha has detailed recall of their current life and their past lives, an average enlightened being, they can sometimes observe their past lives, but it's not going to be to the same level of detail as a Buddha. The Buddha is going to have like detailed recall of exactly what was going on and what did they learn in those past lives to be able to help them now in this life. And the same thing is true about their current life. A Buddha is going to remember those things in detail too, where an enlightened being can kind of observe that, yeah, they've had some existences, but they won't have direct and detailed recall. You're welcome. Okay. So now let's talk about the best way to know that the mind is not enlightened, right? Because we're talking about what enlightenment is. One of the best ways to know about what enlightenment is to understand what it is not, right? Enlightenment is if someone is experiencing discontentedness, the mind is not enlightened. And when I say discontentedness, what I mean is conditioned feelings, right? So you're going to learn about conditioned feelings tomorrow. These are pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're beyond this. So when you see up here that an enlightened being would have eliminated discontentedness and you see the word happiness, what we're talking about is conditional happiness. Right? By the time you get to enlightenment, you're experiencing unconditioned happiness or unconditioned joy, where the mind is just always joyful. It's a mental state where a feeling is going to arise, change, and fade away. A unconditioned mental state doesn't arise, doesn't change, and doesn't fade away. It's just always there, right? It's like unconditional love. It's just always there. I didn't fall in love with you, so there's nothing you can do for me to fall out of love with you. When we talk about falling in love and out of love, this isn't actually love. If you're practicing true love, you're just in love with a person. You just love them for them as a person. You're not trying to change them. You don't want them to be any different than they are. You just love them as a person. So when we have unconditional joy, it's just on. It's just there all the time, or unconditional happiness. So here, if you have discontentedness, meaning conditioned feelings, that based on some condition, I am going to feel this way, that is an indication that the mind is not enlightened. So these are some of those conditional feelings. If you experience any of these, you'll know that the mind is not enlightened. If there's a craving or desire for other people to know you're enlightened, where you're longing, yearning, and wanting people to know you're enlightened, your mind's not yet enlightened. So that's why I say one of the best ways to know someone's not enlightened is they will tell you they're enlightened, right? So if someone walks up to you like, hey, by the way, I'm enlightened. Look at me. Aren't I so great? Right? This is the ego. This is the arrogance. If there's ego and arrogance, if there's the desire like that, then the mind is not yet enlightened. So an enlightened being's mind is going to be so peaceful and so joyful. If you're enlightened, just go be peaceful and joyful. Why you need to come around here and tell us that you're enlightened? What do you want from us? Right? What are you looking for? Admiration? Are you looking for us to bow down to you? What are you looking for from us? So if somebody's going around bragging or boastful that they say that they're enlightened, right away you know that they're not enlightened, because an enlightened being wouldn't brag. They wouldn't be boastful. They wouldn't be arrogant. They wouldn't be looking for admiration. They wouldn't be looking for validation from other people. They would already know that their mind is enlightened. So that's one of the indications you'll know your mind is not enlightened, if you want to tell other people that you're enlightened. If you notice complacency, which is like a lack of motivation, a lack of initiative, a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of willingness to do something, then you know your mind is not enlightened. Sometimes you might feel dull. You might feel lethargic. You might feel like, I'm just going to veg out over here. If you're noticing that, the mind's not yet enlightened, right? So the unenlightened mind is going to live on the two extremes. It's either going to be really excited and really happy and really giddy and go, or it's going to be all the way over here where it's dull and lethargic and complacent. And it's going to swing like that back and forth. And what you're looking to do is come to the middle where you can have motivation, you can have ambition, you can have enthusiasm, but not based in craving, desire, attachment. Your mind doesn't know how to do that right now, perhaps. So you would like to gradually work towards building up your wisdom and your training to be able to do that, where you can make wise decisions with enthusiasm and ambition, but without craving, desire, attachment, and without this complacency, this dullness, and this lethargic condition. Okay? So this is how to know that the mind is not enlightened. And now I'm going to introduce you to the 7 factors of enlightenment. This is a tool to kind of fine-tune the mind that you'll need later in your development. And I just would like you to be aware that it exists. That you can use this now if you like, but it's usually something that you kind of use later when you're fine-tuning things. So like if you think about your development on the path to enlightenment, like you're creating a sculpture and you have this big log, this raw piece of wood. When you get out your hatchet or your axe and you start chopping off the big chunks of wood, this is like when you're first getting started, right? You're just starting to kind of get this piece of wood down to some kind of sculpture. But then eventually, if you're making a sculpture of like a human face, you're going to need to go in with an X-Acto knife. You're going to need to put in the eyelashes. You're going to need to put in the wrinkles in the skin. You can't do that with a hatchet or an axe. You need to have like a little razor blade to go in and do that. And that's what the 7 factors of enlightenment are. They're like this razor blade that goes in and kind of fine-tunes the mind. So when we say 7 factors of enlightenment, some people think that this is what determines whether you're enlightened or not. But it's not. It's a tool or a technique to fine-tune the mind. And just like you're making that beautiful sculpture, you're trying to create this better human being, and you're going to need to fine-tune the mind. And the 7 factors of enlightenment are going to help you to be able to accomplish that. So here's the words of the Buddha, where he's saying, it is, monks, when the 7 factors of enlightenment are developed and cultivated in this way that they fulfill true wisdom and liberation. Liberation is freedom of the strong feelings of the mind. This is where the mind's actually enlightened, right? So here he's guiding you to develop the 7 factors of enlightenment. And he talks about them in other places as well. These are actually the words of the Buddha here too. When the mind becomes sluggish, this is the time to practice the enlightenment factors of investigation, energy, and joy. And I'm going to explain to you guys what those are. When the mind is excited, this is the time to practice the enlightenment factors of tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. The enlightenment factor of mindfulness is always useful, right? So basically when your mind is dull and lethargic and sluggish, there's these 3 factors of investigation, energy, and joy that uplifts the mind and brings it to the middle. But then when the mind is excited and elated, there's these 3 factors of enlightenment that brings the mind down to the middle. This is the tranquility, the concentration, and equanimity. So you're kind of bringing the mind to the middle, depending if it's sluggish or depending if it's excited. And then your mindfulness or your awareness of mind is what's going to help you to determine whether your mind's sluggish or whether your mind's excited. So then you'll know which factors to implement at any given particular time. So where you see your mind is sluggish, with your mindfulness, which you're practicing all the time, you'll then know to practice the investigation, energy, and joy. But where you see the mind with your mindfulness that is excited and elated, then you'll know to bring in the tranquility, the concentration, the equanimity, that calmness and composure. Okay? So that's what the 7 factors are. Is mindfulness is awareness of mind, where you're aware of what's in the mind. In the unenlightened state, you're not aware of what's in the mind. We just kind of plow through life. But if you're going to purify your mind of unwholesome qualities and cultivate wholesome qualities, you're going to need to know what is going on in your mind. So you're developing this in your meditation practice, your awareness of mind. And tomorrow, Siddharth should explain to you the 4 foundations of mindfulness. this is what you're going to learn about how to develop this awareness of the mind. Then there's this investigation, which is dedicated examination and exploration of the teachings, where you're keenly investigating the teachings of the Buddha. That's going to arise this ambition and motivation. So if your mind's sluggish, you're like, I'm not going to the temple. I'm not going to meditate. I'm not going to read that book. I'm not going to talk to my teacher. I'm kind of like dull and lethargic. But if you investigate, if you examine the teachings, this will arise energy, which is effort, determination, ambition, initiative, motivation, vigor, enthusiasm, willingness to do something. And then this is going to spring up joy in the mind, right? And the joy is this joy that is associated with no object, unconditional gladness, where the practitioner is not attaining it through craving, desire, attachment, but the mind is just unconditioned joy. So that's how you bring the mind out of that sluggish condition to the middle. But then there's going to be situations where the mind's excited and it's elated based on a condition. Mom's coming to visit me. Oh, this is going to be so great. Oh, I can't wait to see mom. Or, oh, I got that new job. I'm so excited. Oh, I'm going to get all that money. Oh, that's going to be so exciting. Yay. But when you see that, that's a conditional experience. And as soon as you allow your mind to do that, you're going to end up in the painful feelings at some point. Because what if the company lays you off? What if they go out of business? Now you're going to be sad. Now you're going to be frustrated because you don't have that job anymore. So if you allow your mind to get into that conditional excitement, then you're going to experience the sadness and anger and frustration. Those painful feelings are going to come in at some point. So where you see your mind getting excited and elated like that, you would like to bring in the tranquility, which is relax, steadiness, stability, peacefulness, and stillness of mind. You like to bring in the concentration, which is the mental alertness, the focus, the attentiveness, bringing your thoughts to just singleness of mind. And then you'd like to bring in this equanimity, the calmness, the composure, the evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation. That's what's going to bring your mind out of that excitement and down to the middle, where now you can be peaceful and joyful. Because when your mind's so excited like that, you can't access wisdom. Have you ever been so excited you fell down and like tripped and fell, or you broke something? I know I did. When I was about 8 years old, I had this little pet. His name was Fred. He was a parakeet, and he was in a cage. And I came outside. I was taking him to my grandmother's house, and I was so excited and so giddy. And I was like, everybody, look at my bird. Look at my bird. I was so excited. And I tripped and fell down the steps. The cage popped open, and Fred flew away. And that was it. I never saw Fred again, right? And boy, was I sad, right? Right? So I was so excited. My mind was so giddy, and I got these unwholesome experiences, these unwholesome results because of my unwise decisions. I was boastful. I was arrogant. Look at my bird. Look what I got, everybody. Came out, right? And boom, 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 fell down, and there goes Fred. Right? So that was the results of my decisions. So had I known this, which I didn't at 8 years old, I would have been calm. I would have been composed, right? I would have just politely walked out, right? I would have been very calm and very composed, right? So this is what you would like to do, is have that tranquility and concentration and equanimity. That's what's going to bring your mind out of that excited state down, back to the middle. Okay, any questions on the 7 factors of enlightenment? Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a little lunch break for you guys to go have some lunch. It's basically 12 o'clock. So we're going to get back together at 1:30, where I'm then going to teach you guys the Buddhist chanting and helping you to learn how to do the chanting. We're going to talk about the history of chanting, why you would be interested to learn chanting, and then I'm going to walk you through and actually how to do the chanting. And then we're going to put it together with a meditation so that you guys can then start chanting and meditating together. So enjoy your lunch and have a good time, and we'll see you guys at 1:30. Okay? Thank you so much for being in class and being interested to learn the teachings of the Buddha. We'll see you guys in a little bit.